Hello, everybody. Welcome to an all-new episode of What You Think Doesn't Matter. That's right. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing, and I've got fresh content for you this week. Today, we're going to be responding to a post from Street Cop Training on Instagram, or IG for all you hipsters out there, where they break down a traffic stop involving consent to search and the discovery of contraband. And while the scenario sounds solid on the surface, once you actually dig into the law, it crumbles like a stale cookie in court. I'll give you this scenario, I'll walk you through the answer choices they provide, and then I'll give you my response, and I'm going to explain exactly why some of the logic being thrown around is dead wrong. And more importantly, how I would have handled the stop to make sure the case actually sticks. So grab your coffee, have a seat, and hang on tight. We're about to get into it. Just when you thought you knew your rights, here comes a show that's about to blow what you think you know right out of the water. Welcome to What You Think Doesn't Matter, the podcast that dives deep into the real-world impact of your constitutional rights. We're just not talking theory here. We're bringing you 2 decades of experience grounded in real-life know-how and solid education. If you're ready to move beyond what you think you know and actually understand how to stand on your rights when it counts, then you're in the right place. Now grab your coffee, have a seat, and hang on tight. Here's the host of What You Think Doesn't Matter, Chris Thorne. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute any legal advice. The views and opinions expressed are solely those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the views of Showcon Media Productions or any affiliated entities. Showcon Media Productions, the host, and any associated parties are not liable for any decisions made based on this podcast's content. Always consult a qualified professional for your legal needs. For any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to reach out to the show at wytdm@showconmedia.com. Okay, so before we get into the scenario and we break down the do's, don'ts, and what I agree with and what I don't, let me give you some background on what Street Cop Training is, who they are, what they represent, and some of the controversy that comes with them. Because some of you may not know who they are, may not have heard of them, or if you do, you have heard of them but aren't exactly sure what's going on. Well, here it is. I'll give you what I know. Street Cop Training is a private law enforcement training company that gained a following for its raw, no-nonsense approach to policing. They offer courses in topics like proactive policing, interdiction, and officer safety, often with an emphasis on real-world application and street-smart tactics. A lot of their appeal comes from being brutally honest about what cops face on the job. They speak like cops, teach like cops, and unapologetically reflect the culture of the street, which unfortunately can come back and bite you in the ass because not everybody that listens to your content can do so with a thick skin and not take what you're saying personally or whatever. That unfiltered style, it also brings heat. So, because over the past few years, Street Cop Training's faced a lot of growing criticism. Some of their content, particularly the stuff talking about the locker room talk, the crude jokes, and the way they present certain scenarios, often cross what some people believe are racial boundaries or constitutional limitations. And some people believe that some of the topics that Street Cop Training does teaches the officer how to engage in unethical behavior and get away with it. I personally don't see it that way, but that's just me talking. This is, like I said, I'm not here to bash on Street Cop Training. I'm just giving you my honest breakdown of the situation. As a former law enforcement professional with over 20 years experience working the streets, the jails, and the prisons, combined with my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and my time as a state certified instructor, I can tell you I understand what they're trying to do. And I agree with a lot of it. All right. There's value in being upfront about what rookies are really going to see, hear, and deal with on the street. But at the same time, there's a limit. There's a line. Some stuff needs to be taught on the street and not in the classroom. Okay. And I believe the deep, detailed behind the scenes in the locker room stuff needs to be experienced on the street. Now, you can tell the recruits, hey, this is what you're going to face, without actually giving them examples of what they're going to face. You can teach the realities of the street, the dark humor, the inappropriate chatter, the gut-level stress responses without actually engaging in them. A good trainer rises above that. You guide without reenacting. And when you blur that line too much, the classroom stops being professional and starts becoming a reenactment of the locker room. And I think this is where Street Cop Training screwed up. I believe Street Cop Training got so wrapped up in keeping it real, they lost sight of the balance. And the result was state-level pushback, political backlash, and doors getting shut on them. A lot of funding getting pulled. A lot of agencies have started rejecting their training, and they're going back and retraining all of their employees that went through their initial training with Street Cop. As I said, in my opinion, I think the people who were listening really, truly don't understand what working the street is like. As an experienced officer, in order to gain compliance, you need to speak to the public in means that they understand, and a lot of that time is speaking street to them because that's all they understand. But there is a time and a place for it, and you can express that in their training without actually going there. So, and like I said, I think this is where Street Cop training screwed up, is they got so wrapped up in their persona about keeping it real, keeping it street, that they forgot that they're not teaching in the street. And that's just my opinion on that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our subject today, and let's break down this scenario we're going to talk about. All right, so here's a summary version of what the scenario is. And I summarize it because it's kind of lengthy, but I'm going to give you all the meat, all right? So in a nutshell, it's officer conducts a traffic stop. Driver is the registered owner. There's 3 occupants, a driver, front passenger, and a rear passenger. The officer asks for consent to search. The driver consents. The officer finds a purse on the front passenger seat, does not ask who it belongs to, but opens it anyway. Finds a user amount of methamphetamine. Based on this, as the officer states, he continues searching the rest of the vehicle under the automobile exception clause. Finds a stolen gun and 38 bags of crack cocaine in the trunk. And now no one admits ownership until the passenger finally claims all of it. Driver and rear passenger are released. Well, a month later, the defense is trying to file a suppression hearing to have the evidence dismissed. Now, in my opinion, actually, before we get into my opinion, here are the choices that Street Cop training provides, okay? Answer A, yes, the search was good because the officer had consent. Answer B, yes, the driver consent applies to entire vehicle and items inside. Answer C, no, officers can't ask for consent to search without reasonable suspicion. And D, no, officer's consent did not cover a personal item belonging to another occupant without their consent or individual probable cause. Now, based on all the comments that I saw on this post, everybody was selecting answer D, which is the correct answer on the surface. But here's what they're still missing. If you break down the scenario and you look at it, there are 2 huge, major red flags involved in this search. And it's all based on wording. Those 3 little words that the officer put in there when he said based on this. Those 3 little words are what destroys the entire case. I'm going to explain to you why. But the first red flag is the unlawful purse search, okay? A purse is obviously a very personal item. So the driver can't give consent for someone else's property. We all know that. There was no attempt to ask who it belongs to. The officer searching did not ask who owns the purse. And at this point in time, searching up to the point he finds the purse, there was no independent probable cause that would have granted him the exception to search in the purse. This is in violation of Wyoming v. Houghton, Florida v. Jimeno, and U.S. v. DeRay. Okay, violated all 3 of those cases, which is huge. All right. Now, red flag number 2, the illegal prolongation of the stop. Okay. The officer continues searching under the automobile exception only after finding the meth in the purse. But the meth was obtained from an illegal search. Therefore, the justification for prolonging the stop is tainted. Under Rodriguez v. United States, any prolonged detention must be based on lawful probable cause. The entire continuation of the stop is unconstitutional because the search of the purse was illegal. Okay? So now we've got 2 violations, the illegal search and the illegal extension, and all of that's going to tank this case in a suppression hearing. Without a doubt, judge is going to be like, nope, get rid of it. And so that person's probably going to go scot-free. So now, as many of you know that work in law enforcement or have been experienced in law enforcement, nothing is black and white. That's why we have case law. Everything we do as cops is a gray area. There is nothing black and white. The totality of the circumstances, the reasonableness doctrine, what a reasonable person would do and faced with a similar situation. Okay, all of that comes into play. And that's no exception to this car stop, which is illegal based on the scenario that's provided. So even answer D, which on the surface is the right answer, it's also the wrong answer. And to be honest with you, none of the answers provided provide this scenario any true justification as to what would happen in the real world. Well, guess what? I am going to explain that to you. I am going to tell you what I would have done that would have pretty much slam dunked this case for the plus side, where this person would have had charges stick. Is there any chance that it would go through a suppression hearing? Of course, there always is. Everybody always wants to try and have evidence dismissed. But you would have had a stronger case getting the suppression of evidence dismissed and having it stick if you'd have done it the way I'm going to explain it to you. So hang on tight. I'll get right into that. Now, one of the things that street cop training focuses on is, as a police officer, you need to know your case law. And as a former officer myself, I can't agree and stress that point enough. Your case law is the backbone of your do's and don'ts as a police officer. If you don't know what your case law is, then you really truly do not understand the dynamics, and you do not know how to do your job properly and effectively. And so we're going to spend the next few minutes, and we're going to be covering some of the case law that supports this specific scenario, okay? Okay, the first case that we're going to talk about is Florida v. Jimeno, 1991. This case, basically regarding consent to search a vehicle, extends to the containers inside the vehicle only if it's reasonable to believe the consent includes them. Okay? And here's why it matters. The purse may look like it belongs to someone else, and if you don't clarify that, your consent-based search stops cold. Okay? This case backs what I said earlier. If you're not sure who owns the purse, don't assume you've got the right to open it. The next case is going to be United States versus DeRay, 1948. DeRay stated, government cannot search a passenger's personal property just because they're in a vehicle suspected of carrying contraband. And why this case matters is passenger rights are separate from the driver's consent. In other words, that's basically giving consent to go search somebody else's house. You have no idea who belongs to that house, who lives there. It's not yours. You don't have the authority to give somebody permission over something you don't own. So, and this, like I said, this is old, but it still holds water. Driver's consent is not a free pass to root through everyone else's stuff. All right, just because you control the car, you may even own the car, doesn't necessarily mean you owe everything within the car. All right, then we got Wyoming versus Houghton, 1999. Police may search containers belonging to passengers only if they have probable cause to believe that specific container holds contraband. This matters because consent gives you access to the vehicle. PC gives you access to the purse, not just blanket assumptions. Okay? So, in other words, you need a reason to go into that purse, and it better be pretty solid. All right? Then we have California v. Avesedo, 1991. If officers have PC to believe a specific container has contraband, they can search it, even inside a vehicle. Why this matters is it supports the idea that once you've got a PC, like after finding crack in the trunk, you can go back and legally search that purse. But you still need to build that probable cause before you can crack it open, not afterwards. Okay, then we have Rodriguez v. United States, 2015, which states this is basically about the extending the stop, okay? Officers cannot prolong a traffic stop beyond the time needed to handle the original reason unless there's reasonable suspicion or probable cause. In other words, you can't keep fishing after the consent-based search unless you have something to back it up. If you're searching it and you can't find nothing, you just can't make shit up to make the stop last longer until you do find something, just because your gut tells you there's something there. No. That's a violation of the Constitution. You just can't do it. So if you open the purse illegally and then keep searching because of what you found in the purse, that's an unconstitutional extension of the stop, and it all gets tossed out. Wong Sun v. the United States, 1963. This right here introduced the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, okay? Any evidence obtained from an unlawful search or seizure is inadmissible unless an exception applies, okay? Why this matters is because everything after that illegal purse search is poisoned. The meth, the gun, the crack, all of it. because the officer stated in his own words that he continued with the search based on the evidence he found inside the purse. The search of the purse was illegal. Everything else is considered illegal as well. So if your first move is illegal, everything that comes after it is toxic. That's why this case still gets cited like scripture in suppression hearings. And that's the number one rule, why evidence gets tossed. Okay, so keeping in mind the case laws we just covered and we just discussed, I'm going to tell you how I would have conducted the stop that would be stuck like glue, and the discussion of a suppression hearing may not even be brought up because everything that's going to happen is going to be solid and based on constitutional foundation. So let's go ahead and go from here. All right, Chris, you're the friggin' street lawyer. How would you handle this stop? Obviously, get permission to search the vehicle from the driver, who's the registered owner of the vehicle. They say, yes, we got to search. If you have a search waiver that can be signed, have the driver sign the search waiver granting you permission to search the vehicle. Okay, then you ask them ahead of time, is there anything in the vehicle that I need to know about? Are there any drugs, weapons, contraband, anything that might get me hurt, or anything you're not supposed to have, anything illegal? If they say no, or my favorite answer, not that I know of, okay, fine. Have your cover officer keep an eye on them while you get in and you start searching. You start searching the car. You find the purse, which is obviously sitting in the passenger seat. Common sense tells you, based on training, experience, and totality of the situation, that purse probably belongs to the passenger, which right there tells you you don't have permission to search it from the vehicle owner's perspective. So we ask, who owns this purse? Who does this purse belong to? Nobody's answering. Okay, is somebody, then ask them, it's like, is there anything in this purse that I need to be worried about? All right, wait for someone to speak up. The person who responds with just gives you implied power, okay? If they say, I don't know, oh, okay, do you mind if I look? If they say, don't say anything, or if they give you permission, because the rule of thumb is this: the person who speaks up when asking who owns this purse, or is there anything in here that I should know about, usually the one who speaks up, you could probably be pretty rest assured is the owner of the purse. And once they've spoken up, they've made it known that they're the owner, they're probably going to go ahead and let you search it. Well, either way, just to cover your own ass, set the purse aside. If they don't give you consent directly, set it aside, continue with your vehicle search. If they say yes, go right ahead, then do your search right there. And if that's the case, boom, you find the personal use method in the vehicle. That means that gives you probable cause to search the rest of the vehicle, even though you've already got permission. All right? But if they don't give you consent and you search the purse anyway and you find that meth, and then you come to say that based on this, you use the automobile exception clause to search the vehicle, you just tainted your entire search, and everything you find after that purse is invalid. So, just to CYA, put the bag aside, continue with your search, get to the trunk. When you get to the trunk, when you find the gun, you run the trace, it comes back stolen. You find the 28 or 30 packets of crack in there, boom. Guess what? You just established independent probable cause to search that purse without consent. I would still try and get consent anyway, but at this point in time, even the passenger is going to know the gig's up. So, because you can look at them and say, it's like, all right, here's the deal. Who owns this purse? If there's anything in this purse, it's like, because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to search this purse, and if I find anything in it, if nobody wants to take ownership, then I'm going to arrest all of you for possession, if there's anything in here. Odds are they're going to probably start pointing fingers at each other, or the owner's going to raise their hand up and say, oh, it's mine, or whatever the case may be. No matter how you look at it, somebody's going to get fess up, because not all of them is going to want to go to jail, especially for something they didn't do. So there you go. And that's how you would do with that. So there's tactics, and that covers your behind for any other evidence that you may find. So don't just, oh, I found a purse, let's search it. No, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so with all that being said, someone raised a real solid question, and it's worth talking about. They asked, what if the purse was already open and the meth was sitting right on top in plain view. It's a good point. And legally, this changes the entire game, changes the entire outcome of the situation. Because this right here kicks off the plain view doctrine, okay? And plain view doctrine kicks in if you're legally present in the vehicle, which you are because you had consent from the driver. The contraband is immediately visible without manipulating anything, and its illicit nature is obvious at a glance. If all that lines up, then yes, you can legally seize it without needing consent. And at that point, you've got independent probable cause to search the rest of the purse and the rest of the vehicle without additional need for consent. So, very good question and very perfect and a clear example of plain view doctrine. So, but let me be clear though, that's only if the purse is already open. If you had to unzip the purse or dig around to see it, you've crossed that line and now you've got a suppression hearing and it's called an illegal search. That's the difference between spotting it and searching for it. It has to be visible without manipulation. That's like a difference between a pat-down Terry frisk stop and a search for weapons. It's all about the semantics. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the comments people are leaving regarding this post or their responses to the answer, what choice is theirs. And I'm amazed, but at the same time, I'm not amazed at all the TikTok lawyers out there who think they know what they're talking about and absolutely get it wrong. And I'm going to point them out too, and I'm going to tell you how and why they're wrong and point out the correct way of dealing with what they're suggesting. But we're going to start with this first one, which is a real solid question. The commenter stated, can someone respectfully explain to me the automobile exception? I attempted to Google it and didn't understand it completely. Just respectfully asking. I mean, this type of question shows me the dude's trying to, or this person, I don't know if they're a dude or not, but this person is trying to understand the law and the rights, not just pretending they know it. They truly want to know what it's about. So here it is in plain English. The automobile exception is a legal rule that says police don't need a warrant to search a vehicle if they have probable cause to believe there's evidence of a crime inside of it. Why? Because vehicles are mobile. They can be moved, driven away, and all the evidence within inside it can disappear with it. So if I've got PC to believe there are drugs in your trunk, I don't need to run off and get a warrant like I would for a house or a domicile or a building. I can search your car right then and there because time matters and cars, for the most part, don't stay put. So, but here's an important reminder, right? The automobile exception doesn't give us free rein. It doesn't give cops free rein. They still need probable cause. That means facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe there's evidence or contraband in the vehicle. And recent laws have said that the smell of marijuana is no longer a reasonable cause to search a vehicle because marijuana is becoming legal in more and more locations. So whoever asked that question, solid. And I hope that clears it up for you as much as I can. If you're learning this job or you just want to understand your rights, the automobile exception is one of the cornerstone concepts you better have locked down because you are going to search through a shit ton of cars in your career. And that is one of the most important things you need to learn. Okay. Somebody also mentioned the Ninth Circuit has always done local Supreme Court decisions, which basically in the Ninth Circus, that I refer to them because of my own reasons, they cover Southwestern region. The Ninth Circus essentially states that you need a search warrant or consent for everything because when you pull people out of the car, there's no longer an immediate threat to destruction or disappearance of the evidence. Okay? The Ninth Circuit has been known to swing hard in favor of civil liberties, and if it means getting exceptions like the automobile rule, then that's what it's going to do. But here's the deal. The Ninth Circuit covers states like California, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and a few others in that area. Okay, and they've historically taken the position that once you remove the suspect from the vehicle and there's no active threat, You need to have a warrant, consent, or some type of rock solid circumstances before you can start digging through the vehicle. Because they argue once people are out of the car and the scene's secure, there's no longer an immediate risk of evidence disappearing, which is what the automobile exception was originally designed to prevent. So yeah, the Ninth Circuit just saying, well, it's a car and I think there's stuff in it. It's not going to cut it. You either have to have probable cause plus exigency, or you need to get consent. And unless the car's on fire, shots are being fired, or the guy's actively trying to flush something down the seat, you might be facing a judge who's going to say, nice try, but get a warrant. So if you're working in the Southwest region or within the Ninth Circuit, your case is going to land in a federal court covered by the Ninth. You better know where they stand, because what flies in Texas or Florida is going to fall a hell of a lot shorter in San Francisco. So, because you got to remember too, up until the Ninth Circuit got involved, back in my day, when I went to the academy back in the early 90s, vehicle searches had to fall under the two-prong requirement, which means the two prongs are probable cause and exigent circumstances. Okay? When a state like the Ninth Circuit for that matter says both prongs must be met before a search can be conducted without a warrant, that means you have to have probable cause and exigent circumstances. Well, in Nevada, up until recently, they've always been the one-prong state, which basically means in Nevada, an officer can search your car without a warrant just based on probable cause. I don't know if they've changed that law or not. I had heard rumor a while ago that they have, but I don't know for sure. You can check it out for yourself to confirm it. But in the Ninth Circuit, they've determined that once you remove the driver or passengers from the vehicle, there's no longer an immediate threat of evidence disappearing or being destroyed. So therefore, you have to have a warrant, or you have to have both prongs of the two-prong test in place to get into that car without consent or a warrant. So there you go with that. So, kind of getting off track here. I remember I was watching the show Southland. Some of you may know it, may have heard of it. And there was a scene in here in one of the episodes where cop walks up to a woman who's on a laptop. They suspect her of doing some stuff that may be illegal. And the officer says, ask for permission to search the laptop, and follows that up with, if you refuse, that gives us probable cause to search it without a warrant. I laughed my ass off, because that is an absolute total Hollywood BS. All right. And any defense lawyer worth their retainer is going to eat that alive and get it tossed. So here's the truth. Refusing consent is not considered probable cause. Under the Fourth Amendment, refusal to consent cannot be used against you. It's your constitutional right to say no, period, end of story. Telling somebody otherwise, like refusing to give permission, can be used as PC against you, can be interpreted as coercion, which would then make anything after that point inadmissible. So yeah. I've heard the stories about officers saying stuff like that, especially back in the day before body cams were everywhere. But I'll say this loud and clear. Consent must be freely, voluntarily, and knowingly given. If you lie to get it, it's not consent. It's coercion. And everything you find after that is going straight into the garbage can. So Southland might be entertaining, but if you're trying to model your search and seizure tactics off of what you saw on a TV show, you're going to find yourself in a courtroom losing your badge in one hand and a suppression ruling in the other, if not sitting in the jail you're supposed to be keeping full. So keep that in mind. So, okay, so let's go ahead and, now that we've made that crystal clear, about as crystal clear as mud water anyway, when it comes to automobile exception, let's go ahead and move into some of the other comments here. More specifically, I want to talk about some of the case law these TikTok legal scholars have mentioned and tried to apply. And it's actually quite comical, because if you have any knowledge of case law whatsoever in relation to vehicle searches, I hope you find this as funny as I did when I found them. But let's start with this gem right here. The U.S. v. Barber. Now, the guy who thought this one up clearly wanted to flex his I know case law muscle. All right. But hey, I'll give credit where it's due. He has read Barber. But here's the problem. He read it like it was a fortune cookie. Right? You don't just know case law. You've got to know how to apply it. And Barber has zero. Let me repeat, zero to do with this scenario. You can't just toss a case name into the mix and hope it makes you sound smart. All right? This is not a spelling bee. You don't win points for saying the word correctly. So Barber deals with a whole different set of facts, different circumstances, different legal question. Trying to use it here is like bringing a wrench to fix a broken omelet. Wrong tool, wrong job. And this is where people get online. And this is where people online get themselves twisted. They think, I've read the headlines, I know the whole story. No, you don't. Then we got our next law scholar tossing out Georgia v. Randolph. It's like some kind of trump card, all right? Randolph is a residential search case. That's right, a house, a dwelling, something with 4 walls, a roof, and a front door. It's about one occupant consenting while the other objected to a search of their home. Not a car, not a traffic stop, a home. You try applying Randolph to this person and car situation, you may as well be citing the rules of monopoly. All right. And here's the kicker. In the real world, if you've got passengers stepping out during a traffic stop, you're not going to hand them their purse on the sidewalk before you clear it for weapons. Why? Because you don't know if that purse has a 380 sitting inside of it. Officer safety always comes first. So Randolph, yeah, nice try. That's a swing and a miss, and the bat went flying into the dugout. So Randolph, yeah, swing and miss, bat in the dugout. And while we're talking about case names being thrown around like Mardi Gras beads, let's hit the next one. Ibarra v. Illinois, 1979. Now, Ibarra is actually a solid case in the right situation. It's about the search of people who just happen to be at a place being searched. In Ibarra, police had a warrant to search a bar and the bartender, but not the patrons. One of those patrons was Ibarra. He was patted down without probable cause, and guess what? The Supreme Court said, nope, that's illegal. Can't do it. Here's why it doesn't work here, in this case with the car. Ibarra is about the search of a person, a body, pat down pockets, the works. It's not about containers in a vehicle that's already under a lawful search. The leap from Ibarra to you can't look in that purse if you have consent to search the car is like saying the Fourth Amendment prevents you from opening your own fridge without a warrant. It's just not the same universe. So yes, the commenter got the gist of Ibarra correct in isolation, but applying it here, that's where they drove off the road down an embankment and hit every branch on the way to the river. And that brings us to the last comment we're going to touch on, and this one is a classic case of somebody mistaking a tactic for policy, right? They said the driver wasn't free to leave from the traffic stop, so they couldn't give consent until the stop was over and they were free to go. Now, here's the problem with that. There is no law or case that says you have to finish the stop before you can ask for consent. That's a choice, a tactic. Some officers use it to avoid the I didn't feel free to say no argument later. Or some officers use this tactic to avoid the I didn't feel free to say no argument later. I was taught back in the early 90s in the academy, tell them they're free to go before you ask for consent. It's a clean way to protect the search if it goes to court, but it's not a constitutional requirement. So what this commenter is quoting like gospel is really just one tool in the toolbox, not the law of the land. All right, so before we wrap things up, I want to hit on one more point that comes up over and over, and that's search incident to arrest and inevitable discovery during an inventory search. All right. First off, inventory searches aren't a backdoor for an evidence hunt, okay? They're there to protect the owner's property, protect the department from false claims, and protect you from liability. If you find contraband in the course of a lawful inventory, that's fine, you're golden, it's admissible. But if you went in with the intent to search for evidence and then called it an inventory, you just bought yourself a suppression hearing that you'll probably lose, in addition to a bunch of disciplinary action, which may include either termination or criminal charges. I don't know yet. It depends on how bad it is. But the same thing with search incident to arrest. Arizona v. Gant made it crystal clear. Search incident to arrest is limited to the arrestee's immediate reach at the time of arrest. If they're already cuffed and secured, you don't get to rummage through the junk. just because you've got them in custody. So now, inevitable discovery is one of those rules that gets abused and misunderstood like crazy. Back when I was in the academy in the 90s, we were taught exactly how to write it up, so it held up. You didn't write, "I found meth in a glove box." You'd write, "While conducting a standard inventory of the vehicle prior to impound, I located an item appearing to contain a crystalline substance consistent with contraband." You described what it looked like, not declare what it is. Because the second you start calling it meth without lab results or DRE certification, you've given a defense lawyer an opening to tear your ass apart. So, and the key phrase here is "while conducting an inventory." Just like I said with our scenario earlier with the traffic stop, it was all about how it was phrased. He stated, the officer, after finding the personal amount of meth in the purse, said, "Based on this, I continued to search the vehicle." Okay, that right there is what made that entire search illegal. All right, so the key phrase there is "while conducting inventory." That's your lifeline. It's not about pretending you were looking. It's about showing you followed lawful procedure and the discovery was incidental to that process, not the goal of that process. So the bottom line is this: whether it's consent, probable cause, exigent circumstances, search incident to arrest, or inventory, know your limits, know the rules, and for the love of due process, document it properly. That's what keeps your evidence on the table instead of in the dumpster. So, and that, folks, is why context matters. Knowing case law is one thing. Being able to apply it correctly is a whole different ballgame. Quoting Barber in this scenario is like bringing a fishing pole to a gunfight. Wrong tool, wrong place, wrong outcome. So then we've got the Randolph crowd. If you think Georgia v. Randolph applies to a person at a traffic stop, you might want to sit down before I tell you Santa isn't real. And my personal favorite, the Ibarra v. Illinois. Using Ibarra here is like citing the rules of chess to win a poker hand. Impressive vocabulary, zero relevance. So yeah, so whether it's consent searches, automobile exceptions, or inevitable discovery, the golden rule stands. If you're not sure you can do it legally, don't do it. Because once you taint the evidence, it's done. And the only thing you'll be taking home is a suppression ruling with your name on it. With all that being said, we are about out of time. If you enjoyed the show and want to connect with us, you can find all our episodes and more at www.showconmedia.com. Check out our merch store if you'd like to support the show, and feel free to email us at wytdm@showconmedia.com. Once again, that's wytdm@showconmedia.com with any questions or comments. Until next time, be good, be safe, and always remember, what you think doesn't matter.